Hi, and welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show, where we dive into the issues, ideas, and people shaping our future. Today, we are thrilled to bring you an exclusive conversation with Steve Hilton, one of the leading Republican candidates for California Governor 2026. From advising British Prime Minister David Cameron to hosting the next revolution on Fox News, Hilton's unconventional journey has led him to Atherton, California, where he is now campaigning to make the Golden State golden again. His bold vision laid out on stevehiltonforgovernor.com promises to slash taxes, tackle homelessness, boost housing, and curb crime. But it's not without controversy, and it's certainly not an easy road forward. With gas prices projected to hit $8.43 a gallon by 2026, a $100,000 salary now considered low income in parts of the state, debates over sanctuary state policies and those vaccine mandates like SB 276 and SB 277, and questions about his time overseas, Hilton has plenty to answer for. We're going to dig into his plans, press him on your concerns, and explore whether he can convince Californians to trust him to lead. So buckle up for a candid, no-holds-barred discussion and stick around to the very end, where I ask him your questions in our rapid-fire segment at the very end. Let's get started. But first, a word about the sponsor of this episode. This episode is brought to you in part by We Heart Nutrition. We Heart Nutrition is a phenomenal line of supplements. I have tried so many products on the market that have always delivered half the results I'm looking for or insignificant results. So I am extremely picky about the supplements that I consistently use and that I would ever recommend to you. I have been using We Heart Nutrition now for long enough to be able to confidently tell you that I have seen the results that are promised. I am so thankful for the fact that they are clean, that they are third-party tested, and not only that, but the company that stands behind their products is very public about being pro-life, pro-family, very pro-conservative values. So I feel good while taking their products. And I also feel really good about supporting a company that is aligned with my values and doesn't fight against my values. I would encourage you to check out weheartnutrition.com if you are looking for top shelf supplements that is backed by a company that aligns with your values. Check out weheartnutrition.com. Steve Hilton, before we get started in this interview, I think we need to let the audience in on our little secret.
Yes.
Of how terribly wrong this went when we tried this round one and round two.
It's amazing. So we tried to connect. It was about a week ago. So we're just taping this on May the 27th. And it was about a week, almost exactly a week ago, I believe. And I was in LA, right? America's second city. So this was not me on the road in some rural part of California up in the Sierras or whatever. This is it's in the heart of Los Angeles. And every single thing we tried to do to make it possible for us to have a conversation didn't work.
Yeah.
Like the Wi-Fi didn't work. And then we tried using Starlink, which we have. And then we went with different location into an office building and we used a different laptop.
Nothing worked. Literally nothing worked.
I know. And we were both like really patient and trying to make it worth that. Okay, deep breath. We'll take it easy. This time it'll happen. And it just didn't. And here we are. It's all perfect.
And here we are. And I was just telling Steve, since we tried this interview twice a week ago, I was like, I know you were answering my questions. The audio was so glitchy that I couldn't hear anything you said. So this is really like our first time. It's our first go at it. We get to start from scratch. So thank you for joining us the third time, but the audience's first time to get to know more about you and this exciting run for California governor. So let's just jump right in. I always say when your name comes up, the first question is, oh, is he the British guy? So give us a little bit of background on who is the British guy. Talk to me about your past and why that sticks.
Well, first of all, the British guy is actually an American. So I just want to make sure everyone is very clear about that. I still have the accent, of course. I'm working on that. But we moved here in 2012 with my family from England, my wife and my two sons, to the Bay Area where I live. And we've been here since then, same house. And I got my citizenship in 2021. So I've been an American citizen since then. But actually, the story goes back further because My parents, although I was raised in England, so that's kind of literally true that that's where we moved from. But my roots are actually in Hungary. My parents are both Hungarian. My stepfather as well. The whole family is Hungarian, and they fled Hungary in the communist era. So they were refugees, and they ended up in England in different ways at different times. My parents actually met in England, and that's where I was born. And I like to say that the journey towards freedom
Mm.
was finally my final move in that journey was to come to America, and especially to California, which I think of as the absolute kind of essence of everything that's great about America, or it should be.
Yes,
But
I
of course,
agree.
it
It
isn't
should
right
be.
now.
It should be. California has been the dream, right? I mean, this is where it was the gold rush. It was the American dream, quintessential American dream. You come to California, you make something of yourself, and that was your experience. So you came to California in 2012, is that what you said?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't stay in California. You have a lot of experience, and I want to talk about that before we go into more of your vision for California. But your journey really even includes advising the British Prime Minister David Cameron, which is interesting. I think that's something very unique to what you bring to the table. So, share a little bit about that and how that even parlays into your run for California governor now.
Yeah, so that was actually the job that I had just before moving here. So I mean, my career has encompassed working in politics and government, but mainly in business. So I've started companies in England, including a couple of restaurants, which is a very tough business, which is why when I'm on the road, I always try and meet restaurant owners because it's such a nightmare at the best of times. And thanks to these insane policies in California, it is not the best of times. So I've run businesses, I've worked in the government, and then more recently, of course, here in America, I've had a new career in the media. But the government thing was very instructive because I wasn't the elected person. I was the senior advisor to the prime minister, and I was trying to implement the policy agenda that we ran on, which was actually in many ways similar to the kind of thing that I would love to, not in every way, but in many ways similar to what I'd like to achieve here in California. In particular, the focus on fighting bureaucracy and the swamp and the insane kind of regulatory state that is just snarling everything up, making it impossible to do anything in California. And so I was really leading that fight against the bureaucracy in the UK. And it didn't really work. You didn't really make much impact on it. But I learned, so, as people say, you learn as much from the failures as from the successes.
Absolutely.
And the number one lesson I really took from it was that, well, there's two really big ones. Number one is you have to have total support from the top down. The person at the top, the political elected person at the top, has to be fully behind it, and that wasn't really the case where I was there. Of course, if you look at what's happening in Washington with President Trump and what's happening with Doge and all of that, very different situation. But then that brings us to where the president is clearly and was very clearly behind Elon Musk and what he's trying to do there. But that brings you to the second lesson, which is that you can't allow the system, the swamp, the bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, to take over and run the process and kind of bury you in paperwork and process, because they are really good at that. And that's how they win. And so for me, the lesson I took from it was the only way to really get at this problem is to just massively reduce, like dramatically reduce the size of the bureaucracy, just really cut it down. And I mean, for the proposal that I ended up putting forward was that we would reduce it to 10% of its size. Everyone thought I meant a 10% cut. I meant
So you were the original Doge over in
in many ways. And funnily enough, the really interesting thing, which I was literally in telling this story, I'm just remembering the detail but I know these numbers because I spent a lot of time a couple of weeks ago really studying the new budget that Gavin Newsom put out in California. And one of the most obscene and disgraceful things in that budget, which of course he hid, he didn't kind of put this out there for people to see, but I found it by going through the numbers. Unbelievably, given what a nightmare it is in California with all this bureaucracy and regulation, and these agencies, whether that's the Coastal Commission that's become so notorious, or CARB, the Air Resources Board that's pushing all the insanity on climate and whatever, all these agencies, right? He, in his budget just now, at a time when we have a deficit,
Right.
when he dipped into the rainy day fund that's supposed to be there for a recession, and spending the reserves, with all of that going on, he managed to find more money for the bureaucracy, and not just a little bit. He increased spending in his budget from this year to next year just on the state bureaucracy. This is not teachers or school, anything productive, just the bureaucracy, by 18%.
Wow.
Nearly 20% increase. And then, so that you have now 255,000 bureaucrats employed by the state of California. And he increased spending on them by $7 billion, which is, by the way, the exact amount that he took from the reserves. But funnily enough, that number, 255,000, is just occurred to me. It was exactly the number, well, nearly 200. When I asked how many people work in the bureaucracy in the UK government, 250,000. That was the number. I remember it. And I said, well, actually, my proposal was to cut it back to 25,000 and decentralize power, give power back to people, families, communities, local government, and so on. Decentralize power, end the red tape. Anyway, this is all taking me back to that.
But it's fascinating. What I love about your story and that experience, and even what you just shared, is that you've been there, done that, even if it was in a different country, and you've seen the struggle of actually trying to implement change, like I just said, like as the OG Doge, and you've seen why it didn't take. So you bring that to this, and I do think that is very interesting and unique. Before we keep going, I want to ask you, you mentioned Hungary and your parents' escape. They were escaping communism during that time, right? How does that shape you in what we're seeing in California right now in this rising tide of soft or even overt communism?
Yeah, it's interesting, but because when I first moved here, 2012, with the family, obviously I'm interested in politics. I worked in it and in the government in the UK, and I'm paying attention to what's going on here. And I noticed that some Republicans would use the word communist in connection with what's going on and the Democrats and so on. And I thought to myself, I can see, I don't agree with what Democrats are doing, but I wouldn't call it communist, maybe socialist, but that's maybe a bit harsh. I know communism. It happened to my family. And when I was a kid, we used to go back every single summer, and I saw what happened. My dad would tell me stories. And so I thought that's too extreme. But as things have gone on with this Democratic Party, and they've gone further and further to the left, I think it's a perfectly reasonable comparison. And a couple of things come to mind. So number one, I remember this time, I must have been about 10 or 11 years old, walking around on the streets of the town where my family's from, a town called Szeged in the south of Hungary, and with my two cousins. And for whatever reason at the time, I was like loudly saying mean things about the then communist leader of Hungary. He's called János Kádár, Kadar. And I was saying, Kádár egy hülye, which means he's an idiot. I don't know why I was doing this age 10 or 11, but I was.
It sounds like my almost 11-year-old. So
No, exactly. And so, just joking around. But that evening, my aunt, who was a teacher at the local public schooling, well, they're all public schools, it's communism, teacher at the school, took me to one side. I really remember it. She took me, it was in the bathroom actually. She said, look, I know in England, that's fine. You can say whatever you want and it's okay. You really can't do that here. It's not funny. Your cousins could really get in trouble if someone heard you saying that, if the wrong person heard you, or if, I could lose my job. You just can't say things like that. Really amazing, and I'd sort of tucked it away and hadn't really thought about it until you come here. And in the last few years, I know people, many people who very clearly have said, particularly I'm in the Bay Area in the tech industry, who say, I can't possibly say what I think at work because I'm worried I will lose a promotion, maybe lose my job. We've seen people. There was the most obscene story I thought was, it's not necessarily the most dramatic, but it was so shocking to me. It was I can't remember I think it was Princeton, I know Harvard's in the news. I believe it was Princeton, and it was a sports team, I believe a girls soccer team or something like that. And so I may have the details wrong, but the basics of the story are correct. She was the captain of the team and suddenly found herself dropped from the team entirely. And it turned out it was because someone, she doesn't even know who, anonymously reported a conversation that she'd been having with a friend of hers. So either the friend did it or the friend told someone else about the role of police. This was soon after George Floyd, the role of policing, and she was mildly pro-police, and that got back to whoever's the administrators, and she was dropped from the soccer team.
Wow.
And she's saying, this is America. What are you talking about? Exactly the same as communist Hungary. And then the second thing that I think of is my dad. He was a sports player in Hungary. He was an ice hockey player. He was the goalie for the national team, actually very successful. And once his career was over, he went into business, and I think he owned a paint factory. He was a lot older than my mum. He died when I was younger, but I remember him telling me the story that he was very anti-communist, and that's one of the reasons he left when the revolution happened, and the Soviets invaded in 1956. And I remember him telling me the story. He was so bitter about it. He said, they took my factory. They took it. And they sort of nationalized industry, and in the end, the government controls everything. And you think, well, that's really extreme. Except now, what's happening in California? Just last week, I was with Lindsay Snyder, who's the owner of In-N-Out Burger. And I met In-N-Out Burger and all their executive team, iconic California company.
Absolutely iconic.
Right. And now they're being run by this fast food council, which is basically the government and the unions and the management of fast food companies on equal footing, like running their business. That was
telling them how much to pay their employees.
Yes, micromanagement, and that is happening right now in California. And that model of an industry council where the unions and the government and the business are on equal footing, that's what the unions are pushing for in every industry in California. Is totally insane.
And it's slipping more and more into that overt communism takeover.
Yes, it is.
Here on the West Coast, which that's got to be massively concerning given your experience with true communism.
And so can I just say one last thing, but the really important example, almost the deepest one, which is what's going on in schools, because the communist ideology is very clearly that there's no, the state, the government, the party actually, and it's the same thing, the state and the party, is your ultimate loyalty, and nothing else must come between that. So, and this is the origins of what we call wokeism, the Frankfurt School, all of that stuff, which is the things that get in the way of that must be crushed and defeated. And the most important in their ideology is faith and family. And that's why they are so strongly against faith and want to attack churches and religion of all kinds. And they want to break the tie between children and the family and their parents, and put others in between. And that's what you're seeing going on in the schools.
Wow. I got chills when you said that. How do you see yourself being the antidote to that here in California?
Well, the whole theme of what I want to do. I mean, the actual sort of literally the theme of my campaign and the words that I use to describe it is golden again, to make California golden again. And in different ways, I talk to people. It's a phrase that I've been hearing of the last couple of years that I've been traveling the state. I stopped doing my show on Fox about 3 years ago in order to focus on this. I started a policy organization, Golden Together. I've been traveling the state for years now. And that's one of the things I heard from people, like in their words, we just want California to be golden again. And everyone understands what they mean by that. And it's different for different people, but there is that sense of freedom, I think, that underpins it, which is we just want to live our lives and do our thing and be free and not be bossed around the whole time. And in particular, to raise children the way that parents want to raise children. This is a state full of rebels, and that's the California vibe, right? It's rebels and people who don't want to be told what to do, and there's all sorts of things, new trends that start here, and new business models that are created here, and all sorts of innovation that happens here because we're free spirits and free thinkers, and that includes especially parents doing what they think is best and educating and raising their children the way that they want. So what we're seeing right now, certainly in relation to schools and family and parents, but right across the board, to me is not just un-Californian, it's anti-Californian. It's anti the whole idea of what the Golden State really represents.
Well said. Let's get into some of the vision from your website, because I think it's important people hear you kind of flesh out some of the things that you've put out there. Your website proposes a pro-worker, pro-growth tax reduction, eliminate a state income tax for those earning under 100,000. So the question is, how, if we do that, are you going to still fund critical services that we still need up and running? And how do you convince voters that this will work?
Well, the first point is like, why? The reason is that it's such a struggle. I've been doing these meet now as a candidate on the road for the last month or so, and we're doing, hundreds of events, and people are coming up, thousands of people, and we do open, different kinds of events. Some are Republican Party events, some are just open events to anyone in an area. I call them policy forums, where people come and ask any question. And my main takeaway from all of these conversations, and it's a really sad thing to say, is the word that captures, I think, what people are feeling, what I'm getting from people, is struggle. It's such a struggle in California just to kind of keep going, for families to exist, to find the money, to, for small businesses to keep their head above water. So the financial struggle was what so many people are experiencing, because it's so expensive. Everything's the most expensive in the country, rent, housing, water, electricity, gas, you name it, everything, the most expensive in the country. And so the quickest way we can help people is because there's lots of policy reforms that I've got plans for that will over time reduce the cost of gas and electricity and water and so on, and certainly housing. But that takes a bit of time. The quickest way we can get money into people's pockets is a tax cut. And so that's why I wanted to focus on helping working families who are really struggling, because we have the highest poverty rate in the country. There was a survey just a couple of months ago. 35% of Californians cannot afford basic needs: rent, food, medical care. It's a real disaster for many people. And so that 100,000 threshold, below that, no state income tax, that will put thousands of dollars in your pocket for over 7 million households. Your question about how to pay for it, I did the costing I was a fellow at the Hoover Institution, and I got some, former colleagues there. We did the numbers to pay for that. And also the other part, the pro-growth part, which is a flat tax of 7.5% above 100,000, that in total would reduce state revenues by 18.5%, which is definitely a lot. But it would just take government spending back to what it was just before the pandemic, which is Gavin Newsom's budget, right? This is not some crazy Republican, ideological experiment. This is actually getting us back on track before the pandemic spending got kind of built into the budget, which is what's happened. So, and then you look at, how are you going to save the money? I mean, I gave you the example just now. He's just planning to increase spending on bureaucrats by 18%, actually. You look at what some of these people are being paid. I mean, I know it's not state, so I don't want anyone to, fact check me on that. But the Department of Water, the empty reservoir lady in Los Angeles, head of the Department of Water and Power, paid $750,000. I mean, right across the board in state government. It used to be said that, you work in the government and you don't get paid very much compared to the private sector, but, so we give you in exchange for that really generous pensions and healthcare and, retirement, what?
Not so much.
Now they get everything.
Yeah.
You get paid incredibly well.
Yeah.
Like these public health directors who shut everything down, $500,000, the one in LA, Barbara Ferrer, on and on. So there's an enormous amount that we can cut from the state government without even touching what's happening with basic services, which, by the way, even they are, I mean, money, I don't even buy the premise that money guarantees good outcomes. There's a really perfect comparison with New York and Florida as states. So basically, they're the same size, same population. New York's budget is double Florida's, but Florida has vastly better outcomes on everything that matters. So just spending the money isn't the point. You've got to have really good, accountability in there to make sure you get good results.
That kind of ties into what you were just saying about the the poverty rate, right, in California. There was recent May 2025 data that shows that you've probably heard this, $100,000 salary is now low income, which is so crazy to me. And I hear it. I hear it from people all the time who are saying that they can't afford California anymore. I have family members who are like, we're hamstrung in California. We're looking at somewhere to move to because it's so tricky here. But how beyond the tax cuts, do you have ideas to make California more affordable for those families?
Yes. Number one is a really immediate one is the cost of gas, because it's such a big part of people's budgets, and for working class people, it's even more so. They typically have, they live further away from work and drive more and so on. So that's a big component of your budget. So you can do simple things to cut the cost of gas, even before you get to the gas tax, which a lot of people focus on. We can, with regulatory changes that I can directly do, even without the legislature, you can unleash California oil production. At the moment, we're importing it, most of it from halfway around the world. That's insane. When we have it right here in California, that would help bring the cost down. It would bring new business to the refineries in California.
Which are shutting down. We're having refineries shutting down.
And so that's the second point. We can reduce the regulations on the refineries a lot. But again, just to bring them in line with what is there in the rest of the country. We are way more extreme on these regulations for the refineries. All that dates back from the 1970s and the smogs, which of course nobody wants to go back to, but car technology has improved vastly since then. So actually, you don't have smog anywhere else in the country. It's just not needed anymore. There's a whole set of things you can do to bring gas prices down. That's the quickest thing. But you can also do, long term, we have to deal with the housing costs. And the number one thing there is we've got to end this war on single family homes. They've got this ideological obsession. Again, it goes back to the communist thing. They really do want to tell you how to live.
I want to interrupt you just for a second, because you mentioned the housing crisis. So again, our most current data shows that $218,000 income is needed right now to afford a $846-ish thousand median home. So a lot of builders would say that regulations are the cause. That's just driving up house cost. And then on top of that, you have the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're coming in and they're using tax dollars through local nonprofits to buy up real estate to make housing affordable, but the end result is homelessness and then driving up prices in housing even more. So how do you get in there? We're talking about communism and how communists don't want the dissent. How would you get in there? It's nice to talk about, right? But how do you get in there and actually be a change maker against a very deep state system in California?
Yeah, you've got to allow housing to be built. You've got to allow the type of housing to be built where people want it, which is, especially when they're families, they want single family homes. Okay, this whole thing about you can only build inside the current urban development footprint. We want people in apartments near transit. That's not California. That's not how we would develop. That's not the California dream. They call it sprawl, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, we're against sprawl. I call it the California dream, the suburban lifestyle. That's what people want.
Yes.
And we have plenty of space in California, right? So you just need to relax the rules. At the moment, they're blocking housing from being built that goes outside of the development footprint. And we're already the most dense in terms of housing pretty much in the country. Only 5% of our land is developed. We could increase it to 6% and would still be low compared to many other states. That would be enough room for 10 million people to live in single family homes with like a massive lot. Mm-hmm. So the kids could enjoy so that is something that there's a bunch of things that you have to do, regulatory changes, which are not going to be easy. And it may well require the declaration of an emergency to do it, which I'm perfectly happy to do, because for what we've seen is years and years of the legislature failing to address this, and they keep putting in these bills and they're totally captured by the unions. So here's an amazing number that I want to share with your audience. So right now in California, you've got over 1 million housing units, and that's a lot, right? Even the there's a sort of consensus of the pro-housing argument is we need about 3 to 3.5 million more homes than we have right now.
Right.
But you've, over the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, right now you've got over 1 million of them that have been approved for local zoning. They're compliant with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. They're all ready to go. They're blocked by lawsuits, by litigation, filed under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which uniquely has this private right of action that allows anybody to file a lawsuit to block housing. 70% of CEQA lawsuits are used to block housing. Most of them are filed not by any environmental group or anyone to do with the environment. They're filed by unions in order to use as leverage against builders. And what they want from that are what's called project labor agreements, where they insist on union workers only or massively elevated wages. Look, I want people to be well paid, but not like 4 times as much as the market rate. So that the cost of building the thing is so expensive, no one can afford to live there. I mean, I could go on. Then you've got the building codes, right? The endless fiddling with the building. Every 6 months, they're changing the building codes. New environmental this, new that, makes it all more expensive. On and on. There's so much there that it's all the result of this kind of ideology. A lot of it driven by the climate ideology and the corruption from the unions. So you just got to go in there and blow it all up, as I went.
Blow it up, burn the whole thing down. Let's switch gears a little bit, because one of the questions that came up from my audience when they found out that I was going to be interviewing you, a lot of my audience are moms and conservative moms. The number one question I get when I say I'm going to interview, whether it's legislature or a gubernatorial candidate, is ask him about the vaccine mandates on our kids.
Yes.
So let me just, for background real quick, because I want you to unleash I actually don't know where you stand on this. So I'm really curious for you to just take us where you're at. In California right now, if you have a child who was legitimately vaccine injured, it is, and I will use the word impossible, to get a vaccine exemption because of the hyper regulations that were passed a few years ago and put on doctors. There's so much oversight on doctors. So doctors are scared to write legitimate medical exemptions. And a lot of medical exemptions that were written that should have been grandfathered in were taken away. And then under SB 276, SB 277, we had religious exemptions that were taken away. So in California, if you are a mom who has a child that cannot get the currently recommended vaccine schedule, you are denied an education from preschool or daycare all the way up, and we're talking college, all the way up in California. It is a huge issue, and it was probably the number one issue prior to COVID for moms who were for medical freedom. Where do you stand on this issue? And would you change where we're at in California with all of that? Men don't belong in women's sports. 79% of Americans agree, but only one athletic brand is taking a stand: XXXY Athletics. Their brand mission is to stand up for female athletes and the protection of women's sports. The clothes are so high quality. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts right now. This one's my favorite. You guys ask about it every time I wear it, because it also makes a statement that you stand with women and girls. XXXY Athletics has amazing logo tees like what I'm wearing right now, and premium workout clothes, including leggings, moisture-wicking tops and tanks, tennis dresses. You guys have seen me wear that cute tennis dress that's gonna be my go-to all summer, and skirts and more. You no longer have to sacrifice fit, quality, and style to wear your values. And honestly, why in the world would you give your money to the big brands that sell women out when you could wear XXXY Athletics? So head to thetruthfits.com, enter promo code RootedWings20 to get 20% off. That's code RootedWings20 for 20% off only at thetruthfits.com.
Yes. I'm 100% aligned with everyone who is concerned about this. I'll just to sort of make sure people understand where I'm coming from. I was going right back to the beginning of the pandemic. I'll talk quickly about the pandemic, and then I'll get to the vaccine mandate point. So on the pandemic, I was the first person to speak out against the lockdowns. I did it in March 2020 on my TV show on Fox News. I was the first I had Charlie Kirk on. We did it together. It was when the 15 days thing was still going, when you had many, many conservative voices still saying, no, we got to be careful, telling President Trump, don't, be cautious. I looked at the science. I live right near Stanford, and this is the key point I'm going to make. And I met Jay Bhattacharya. I was the first person to put Jay out in the media to speak out against this, right? In March 2020.
That was early.
Right at the beginning. And let's fast forward to the mandates point. So when the mandates came in, I immediately went to Jay, who's a good friend, and what a thrill that he's now at the NIH. Sweet revenge after the way he was.
It is huge revenge.
And it was incredibly clear, and everyone should have been clear that the vaccines, as Jay put it, like Jay's not anti-vaccine. He said, look, he was very clear with me. People under 40, unless you're ill, pre-existing conditions, etc., there's no need for you to take it. It's your personal choice. Over 50, you should probably take it. Between 40 and 50, gray area, talk to your doctor. He said there's no justification for a vaccine mandate because the vaccine does not prevent transmission. So it's entirely, if you believe there's a benefit, then it's entirely a personal benefit. There is no public case for it at all. So we're very strongly against the mandate. And by the way, I was banned from YouTube for saying that, but hilariously, they banned it on my podcast when I had Jay on to talk about this. It's an amazing story. And then they said, oh, we've taken the episode down, community policies, guidelines, whatever, on health. And so we complained through the normal channel and say, that's not right. We're correct on this. Jay's a world-class epidemiologist, whatever. In parallel with that, I said, right, I'm going to really go for it on my Fox show. I'm going to lead with it on Sunday night. And I'm going to go for not just on the vaccine mandate point, but also YouTube for censoring it. So, of course, we reached out to YouTube for comment and say, come on the show and debate. And then miraculously, when we got a response from the normal process, like any other person, it was like, this is literally what they said. We have carefully reviewed your content and can confirm that it is against our policies. So the video will stay down.
They doubled down.
But within hours, the corporate PR team said to my Fox producers, oh, we're so sorry. This was all taken down in error. And so it's not. The whole thing is BS, right? None of that made sense. Anyway, so I'm strongly, and I actually feel so outraged that people were penalized in any way for refusing to take the vaccine. It's a point that I make all the time. Just a couple of weeks ago, I did an event at the French Laundry, very, very specifically there.
The audience will know about the French Laundry.
Right. And the point was to say, we're not going to let them forget what they did. And I announced a bunch of things there, including a COVID accountability commission that I will appoint as governor to report within 6 months. It's not going to go on forever, to investigate the decisions that were made, to expose any corruption that was there, including, for example, teacher union influence over school closures and the vaccine point, and to make recommendations on restitution, compensation, all of that stuff. And furthermore, on the vaccination schedules, everything you're asking about, it will be a key determinant of who I will appoint as the Surgeon General. We now have a Surgeon General in California, and they can lead the implementation of all of this. So I'm 100% with everyone who's concerned about this. I would say a final thing I'll say on this is in some ways, and I know it's not the same as just the vaccine point, it's broader, but I was Maha before there was Maha. So I wrote a book 10 years ago called More Human. And if you look at that book, and there's particular chapters on health and on food, it's really what I've talked to Nicole Shanahan about it. She's a friend, she lives near me. It's really what we think of as the Maha agenda. That's what I was arguing for 10 years ago.
So with the kids specifically with schools, what because that passed through the legislature, both 276 and 277, but we're at a point now where you have families, and I'm doubling down on this because I know our
Yes.
listeners, it's so important for them to hear this. We're at a point now where many families in California are paying high taxes for an education system that denies them entry because their kids cannot or will not, for religious or for medical purposes, get the recommended whole vaccine schedule. So because that went through the legislature, what are your plans with that?
Yeah, the governor. Well, first of all, I'm against it, and so. But the question is, what can you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was one of the most disgusting things that ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
That they forced parents to vaccinate their children totally unnecessarily in order for them to be able to go to school. It was just, or any other participate in anything. There was no justification for it. We need an apology and all the rest of it. In terms of what you do about it, I'm very prepared to use emergency legislation, emergency executive action to deal with problems that the legislature won't deal with. But that's and the question is whether this fits within the parameters of what emergency what the emergency legislation allows you to do.
Right.
I think it will. I think it will because the whole framing of emergency legislation, emergency powers legislation, is about health and safety and the peril of people and so on. And I think that so I haven't specifically looked at whether this would qualify, but after this conversation, I will, because
Good.
I hear you very strongly that you want to know, and your audience wants to know, what can you do about it?
Yes.
Given that it's in legislation, and I can't wave a wand and like overturn legislation, but there are things you can do one way or another to get things done.
Yes, good to know. Okay, let's move into what just happened today. So on the day that we're recording this, let me just give a little bit background, and then we'll go into what happened today, and then I'm going to put you in the hot seat with audience questions. So a little bit of background. There is a male in California. He is a student at a local high school in California. His name is A.B. Hernandez, and he has been competing in the CIF qualifiers in the female division. His mom put out a video that was just completely nutty, very supportive of her son competing in and against females. Well, not only is he competing, but he's been crushing the female athletes. So he's been winning first place in all these competitions, long jump, triple jump, and he's actively been taking these qualifiers from legitimate female athletes. He just qualified for the CIF state track and field championships that are going to be held this weekend. I woke up this morning to President Trump putting out a tweet, and I'm just going to read a portion of it because I think it's important to give context to the question I'm going to ask you. So I woke up to President Trump threatening to pull large-scale federal funding from California if the state continues to allow males to compete in female sports. And he basically says that under the leadership of radical left Democrat Gavin Newsom, he continues to illegally allow men to play in women's sports. This week, a transition male athlete at a major event won everything and is now qualified to compete in the state finals. He goes on to say that this is totally not fair and demeaning to women and girls. Please be hereby advised that large-scale federal funding will be held back, maybe permanently, if the executive order on this subject matter is not adhered to. The governor himself said it is unfair. So Trump said he is going to speak to Gavin Newsom today at some point, basically final warning. What are your thoughts on all of this, and how would you respond to all of this gender ideology that is making girls' spaces unsafe and unfair in California?
Well, this really is something that absolutely will be a top priority, because it is literally putting girls in danger.
Yes.
We've seen actual injury. It's so offensive to most normal people that we're even having these conversations. It's like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it must be ended. You cannot have biological men in girls' locker rooms. No, not at all, not ever. It's 10 years ago, it would have been a crime. Now
it literally would have been a crime.
Right. So what are we talking about? There's no discussion. There's no debate. It is obviously totally wrong and will be stopped. And so now Newsom, and for those who might want to say, oh, that's extreme. Gavin Newsom agrees. He said it's deeply unfair. He said it to my friend Charlie Kirk. So what's he doing about it? So the president is 100% correct to force the pace on this, make sure that action is taken. I'm trying to keep up with what, during the day that this has happened, what Newsom is announcing, and there's Democrats in the legislature looking at new rules for track and field and maybe a third category. I don't know what exactly they're doing. It's all clearly in response to President Trump's move here. So something is moving, right? They are finally moving. Now, whether it's going to get to where the vast majority of common sense people would want it to get to, that's what we got to keep an eye on. But it's a really good example of the power of the Trump approach. And it's fantastic that he's done this, and keep going until we get to common sense and sanity on this issue.
Well, common sense is you've got male and female and nothing else. We don't need a third at this whole third. We're going to do 3 first place. Well, how about if we do 4 first place winners? Not everyone gets a blue ribbon. I'm so over. It is completely insane. Okay, Mr. Hilton, this has been so great, but I do want to put you in the hot seat. We're going to popcorn through audience questions for those who listen to my show and are all across social media. Whenever I have a great guest coming in, I usually put it out just ask me questions that I can just go at it with him. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay. He wants, speaking of you, hang on, let me pull this up. Okay. He wants every K through 12 child using AI tablets for education. This is insane and so wrong. Why?
That's totally false. I have no idea where they got that from. I'm totally opposed to it. Okay. In that book, 2015, More Human, again, before anyone else was calling for it, I called for a ban on smartphones for under 16s because of the harm that it was doing. Everyone said I was crazy. Now it's being introduced all across the country in schools. So I don't know where that person got that from. It's 100% wrong. I'm militantly against that kind of thing.
Okay, good to know. I appreciate setting the record straight. What is his stance on abortion?
So I want to move us in California towards life. I feel that this whole issue has been, I agree with. I think it should never have been decided by the judges. It should always be decided by the people. President Trump made that possible. And so that's where we are in California, and people voted in California. So within that constraint of what's in the state constitution since that referendum, I want to move us towards life. I want to do everything we can to make sure that we have fewer unwanted pregnancies, and that if you do have, if people are in that situation, that we've got to stop the insanity of making it harder for organizations, whether that's faith-based or other, who are trying to encourage adoption or help with that process or whatever. We got to make their life easier, not harder. But I think the broadest point I want to make on life is that I want California to be a place where people want to have children, and raise families, and and have beautiful babies and have more of them because they can afford to, and it's a wonderful place to raise a family. So that's what I mean. I want achievably move us towards life. That's what I would say.
We talked about your solutions to the ridiculous gas tax. Lots of questions on gas, just so you know, it's good for you to know. The audience really cares about gas prices that are out of control, women's sports. Okay, border control. What are your thoughts on our open border?
Well,
the sanctuary state policies in California.
Yeah, so thankfully, thanks to President Trump, the border's not open anymore. But of course, we have the legacy of the open border, and the sanctuary state policy is just unbelievable to me, that they actually pass a law that clearly, explicitly prioritizes dangerous, violent criminals over our own citizens. So the interesting thing on that, on the SB 54, which was passed in 2017, the sanctuary state bill, is my friend Michael Gates, who was the city attorney in Huntington Beach, now part of the Trump administration, the Justice Department. He filed a federal lawsuit arguing that the sanctuary state policy law in California is unconstitutional because it's constraining federal action on immigration. So that's going through the process. I strongly support that. And then in the meantime, you have these local governments, like the worst is San Diego, that are going beyond
So
even what
bad.
the state
So
law
bad.
says. And
Yeah.
so you've got to push back against that. And again, I think this qualifies under emergency because it's about keeping people safe. Safety is one of the words in that emergency enabling legislation. So I want to take a look at it, but we've got to stop it one way.
So you would be in support of the new Operation Guardian Angel that has just been announced, I think it was last week, where it's a whole workaround of the sanctuary state policies in California to really get these people who are here illegally out.
Of course, I mean, I don't understand how they can even defend it for a second that you've got, criminals who are here, illegally and who've broken the law and in some cases committed really dangerous, violent crimes that you wouldn't immediately want to remove them when they've been through the process, right? They've been given, orders to leave. I mean, it's just beyond,
It is beyond. Okay, a couple more questions for you. How did you get Jack Hibbs' endorsement? That's a big one. So congratulations on that endorsement. Jack Hibbs, for those of you who don't know, is a very prominent pastor out here in California, very outspoken against the madness of California. And he came out with a very early endorsement. So this person is asking, why does Steve deserve the Christian vote?
Well, look, I would make my argument that I want to make California golden again. And by that, I mean, this sort of centerpiece of my campaign is very practical, it's pragmatic. I'm not running to be the pastor of California, I'm running to be the governor of California. And my plan is, very simply, great jobs, great homes, great kids, make the California dream a reality, a good job where you make enough to raise your family in a home of your own, in a safe neighborhood, with a good school so your kids have a better life than you. That's what I want to do. Now, in terms of Jack, I mean, we've gotten to know each other over the years, and I just find him to be an incredible source of strength to me personally. And we just have a shared vision of what this state could and should be and how we need to implement it. And so we've just been talking, a lot, and that's how that happened. And I'm incredibly honored to have his endorsement and a very active support.
It was a very large one. And I think that also came right before Charlie Kirk's got his support thrown in for you too.
Yes.
You've got some big names supporting you, which is exciting. Okay. Bullet points on keeping farms and ranches alive in California.
Okay, number one, we have to. I mean, I'm in the Central Valley. Almost every week, I'm in the Central Valley or some other farming area. It's a top priority. I love our farmers. It's disgraceful what's happening. They're being crushed deliberately by the Democrats in charge who hate this industry. They think it consumes too many resources. It's like a bad industry that must be crushed, just like the oil and gas industry. So here's what we need to do. Well, number one, they are being the water allocations from the State Water Resources Control Board and the Sigma program that goes along with it.
Yep.
It's all just taking the water away, water that we have. And this idea that we don't have enough water is ridiculous. We do. We're just not getting it to the people in the right way. And what they pay, a lot of these farmers have paid for the water, and they're still not getting it. We need to. There are simpler things that we can. There are simple things we can do to increase our storage of water, like raising Shasta Dam, like doing more groundwater recharge. I was in Ventura County. There, they have a 100-year-old, thing set up there for taking water off stream, storing it in ponds, using it for irrigation. Suddenly, the environmental extremists said you can't do that because of some other fish. I mean, we all heard about the Delta smell. There's another one in Ventura, some kind of trout that they're
no.
I mean, it's just never ending. The incentive, give them more water, but it's not just water. It's the labor regulations, right? The 40-hour overtime is a nightmare for farmers. Used to have an exception. It doesn't fit with how farming works. And actually the farm workers have been poorer as a result. The forced electrification of trucking and farm equipment, that's insane. There's so many on pesticides. There's a whole set of things that we can do, again, like with so many other industries, just relieve the burden of this incredibly kind of hostile nanny state bureaucracy.
Very, very overregulated. Tell us about your view on the Second Amendment. I have my CCW, and I will tell you it was so hard to get in California and
Yeah.
very expensive. So many hurdles to do it the right way. It was an
Yeah.
extremely long process. What is your perspective on the right to carry the Second Amendment in
No,
California?
I'm strongly for it. I think that I it's interesting. I made a real effort to understand the Second Amendment because coming from a culture in the UK where it's just totally different. Um, and you see people, and I find it when I go back to the UK now, and you have these arguments with friends, and they still are in that mindset of, oh, what's wrong with Americans and their guns, and they just don't understand,
Mm.
and they don't appreciate both the philosophical and the practical arguments in favor of responsible gun ownership. The practical argument. I was just with the sheriff, Sonoma County sheriff, right, and you got some, mid-sized towns there, but also very rural. And he was very proudly showing me their response room, where the 911 when the calls come in, and his response times are very high. I remember the numbers. So 99.3% of calls are answered within 3 seconds. Very proud of that.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's great. But to get, sometimes the response can take an hour if we have to get someone to the coast or whatever. And so that's the point. Like America's a big place, and what are you going to do if the police are like an hour away? How are you going to defend your family or your property? So that's the sort of practical argument. And then the philosophical argument, which is, I think, a beautiful argument. The idea of the Second Amendment is to guard against tyranny by the government. And so to me, as someone who believes in the power of the people against, that's, what I mean by positive populism, it's a very, very precious argument. So I'm strongly for it. What I want to do is hear from you and others, actually, what are the specific things that could be changed in California that would actually help responsible gun owners? And the final point I'd make is it's just the lie of the Democrat argument here, because they keep going on about, guns and gun violence and whatever. But when they had an opportunity to actually do something about it, they totally blocked it. Bill Essayli, friend of mine, fantastic legislator, is now, of course, U.S. attorney appointed by President Trump. When he was in the legislature, he put forward a bill that would increase automatic jail time and penalties for gun crime, for carrying a gun when committing a crime, for using a gun while committing a crime, injuring someone, killing someone. Each of those steps, another 5 years automatic jail time. The Democrats blocked it. Why? Because they're not really interested in gun violence.
No.
They're interested in blocking gun ownership. That's
Yes.
what they're really against.
Yes.
It's outrageous.
Well, and it does force you into more dependence on the state, which is their whole game plan. It's lack of independence, lack of ability to defend yourself, because you need the government, don't you? You really need the government to defend you. As we wrap up, the biggest question that I think is going to be most pertinent for you is that Republicans are only 25% of California's electorate. So with Democrats completely dominating this state, and how conservative your view is on restoring California to this golden ideal, how do you plan to win over the moderates, the independents, or even some of those Democrats who are starting to see how absolutely insane the Democrat Party has become? What's your plan to get more on board?
Well, first of all, a practical, positive, common sense policy agenda focusing on those things that I outlined: great jobs, great homes, great kids. I think everyone can get behind that. So focusing on practical improvements to make it better and easier to start and raise a family in California, to start and run and grow a business in California. Just simple things that make life better for working families and small business. But actually, the interesting thing is that even without persuading people, and of course I want to persuade people and build a big coalition for change, but actually there are enough existing Republican voters for me to win in 2026. If you look at the number of votes that President Trump got in the November election last year, there are more than enough votes to win in a midterm election in 2026, as long as all the Trump voters come out. Now, of course, that's a big if, but it's something we can work on.
Yeah.
We can, that's what a campaign can do, to make sure people vote and realize that change is possible. That's really what I'm trying to convey with this campaign and traveling the state and really going for it. Is, I think for too long, we've been like stuck in this resigned mode of, oh, this is just what it is. It's California, all you can do is like leave or put up with it. No, it's our state, right? It's our future. It matters to America as well as to all of us who live here. And we got to fight for it. And change is possible. We just got to believe it and go for it.
I love it. And yes, that's why we are still here and why we didn't pick up and go to Idaho, because I do truly believe that there is a golden comeback in our future. I do. I strongly believe that. And I love that that's what you are championing. How can people follow your campaign, get involved? If they have questions for you, how can they be in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best way to follow is on social media. I'm very active on X. We put out everything, lots of videos from all the things I'm doing at Steve Hilton X on X, at Steve Hilton X. And then I'd love everyone's support. You know, we're trying to build this grassroots army for change. So get involved in the campaign. That is stevehiltonforgovernor.com. FOR, stevehiltonforgovernor.com.
Well, I'm going to let you have the last word just to speak directly to the audience, and then we'll close out.
Well, thank you, Britt. I just want to say, look, we know how bad it is in California. We're all living it. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be like this. It really doesn't. We can have great jobs where we make enough to raise our families the way that we want without the endless nanny state, micromanaging bureaucracy telling us what to do, where to live, how to raise our kids, how to run our business. It doesn't have to be like this. We can have change, but we've got to fight for it. It's not going to happen just by complaining about it. We've got to go out there. We've got to organize. We've got to talk to our friends and neighbors and coworkers and make them realize that change is possible. And then we're going to do it, and we're going to make California golden again.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mr. Hilton.
Great to be with you. Thank you.